February marks 132 years since women in Iowa gained the right to vote in some elections. It wouldn't be until 1920 that the 19th Amendment became law, which granted all women in the U.S. the right to vote.
And the battle to approve full suffrage wouldn't come easy. Tonight, in our latest edition of We the People, KTIV's Larry Wins looks back at how Iowa played a key role in giving women the right to vote.
There were some real leaders of the suffrage movement here in Iowa.
Matt Anderson of the Sioux City Public Museum says Sioux City and a number of women in the community played an important role in seeking the right to vote.
Eleanor Gordon, who had been one of the ministers at Sioux City's first Unitarian Church, was the head of the Iowa Equal Suffrage Association.
Sioux City's Evelyn Belden also served 3 terms as the association's president. And Julia Clark Hallam was a prominent suffrage leader who also called Sioux City home.
The movement for women's suffrage was led by educated middle-class women.
Twice during the 1870s, Sioux City's Academy of Music, the community's first major indoor event venue, hosted speeches by the nationally known suffragette Susan B. Anthony, who many considered a female agitator. During her speeches, she also targeted a local brothel that had gained notoriety.
Yeah, she thought that that if women had the vote, that things like that would be cleaned up.
But even before this, it was Council Bluffs' Amelia Bloomer who became the first woman in Iowa to speak publicly for women's rights. Before moving to the state, she published The Lily, the first newspaper controlled by a woman and dedicated to women's interests.
She's who the term bloomers, bloomer pants, is named after.
One of the nation's earliest events in the movement took place in Boone, Iowa during 1908, when a parade of roughly 150 women marched through Boone demanding the right to vote.
That was seen as quite radical.
There was plenty of opposition to the idea of suffrage, not only by men, but women as well. Mary Gay Dolliver, a longtime dean of women at Morningside College, was president of the Sioux City Association opposed to women's suffrage. And despite efforts by some men like Sioux City Journal publisher and state senator George Perkins, attempts to add such an amendment to the state constitution could not pass 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature.
And one legislature would pass it, and then the next legislature wouldn't.
There was a partial victory on the long road to suffrage way back in 1894. That's when the Iowa legislature granted women the right to vote on tax and bond issues like school or library funding, but not for candidates in a general election. Full voting rights for women would not happen until 1919, when Iowa became the 10th of 36 states needed to ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Larry Wentz, KTIV News 4.